which includes primarily the kidneys. So you have the kidneys here, and from there you have the, what's this one? The ureter, right? And then it goes direct to the urinary bladder. Okay, for this one, please note this one is not the urinary bladder, but this one is your uterus. But you can see the urinary bladder just right here. Okay, so it's below the uterus. For the male, you don't have any problem because there is no uterus there covering. Okay, so you have the urinary bladder, and basically, as you can see, that the urinary bladder for females is smaller, and this explains why more often females go to the restroom. Okay, so males could hold more urine because the urinary bladder is basically bigger, and then you have the urethra here. Okay, so as you can trace here, the ureter goes here. So from here, so if you could trace coming from here, then it goes down here to the urinary bladder. So this is the urinary bladder, just inferior to the uterus. Okay, now let's look into some of the details here. Be sure that you know the position of the urinary system with reference to the other systems. Okay, so primarily the urinary system is composed of the kidneys and the accessory structures. So the main organ for the excretory system would be the kidneys. Okay, so this one is the left kidney. Okay, now there are two main parts of the kidney. You have the cortex, or the renal cortex, and the renal medulla here. So there are two regions. Okay, now what you see primarily in the renal cortex, starting from the renal capsule, would be these different renal corpuscles. And if you are going to see clearly the renal corpuscles, you find this. You have the glomerulus with the Bowman's capsule, plus you have the kidney tubules, and then part of the kidney tubules go down here to the medulla. Okay, and we will look into this further. Okay, and for the renal medulla in this region, you find groups of these collecting vessels and this loop of Henle. They converge together to form the renal pyramids. So this would be the renal pyramid. Okay. Now you will imagine that while urine is formed here in the nephron, primarily filtered out through the Bowman's capsule and the glomerulus here. Now you would imagine that urine would be collected here, okay, all through here, and they would end up to this calyces. All right, so you have the minor and the major calyx. Okay, so the minor calyces would collect the urine coming from the collecting vessels here. So urine will be collected all to these minor calyces, and then to the major calyx, and then from here to the ureter. Okay. Now imagine that the blood comes in here. All right. The blood comes in here through the renal artery. Okay. Now there are branches of the renal artery. Did you identify the branches of the renal artery? From the main renal artery, so this branches into? So this one would be the lobar artery, and then you have the segmental artery, okay, and then it arches as the arcuate artery, okay. Did you identify this? What are the arteries are this? Okay, you have the cortical arteries, or this one would be the, what's this? Cortical radiate. Okay, the cortical radiate artery. And then you have these arteries. How do you call these arteries?
That's the interlobular.
Interlobular, that's correct, the interlobular artery. You have the interlobar or the segmental artery here, and then you have the interlobular arteries. Okay, now if you are going to look at this one is the interlobar, okay, the arcuate, and then the interlobular arteries, okay? Or you may also call this as the cortical radiate arteries. Okay, and then from there it goes here. This is an arteriole, so you call this as the afferent arteriole. Afferent arteriole. And then if you trace from there, from the afferent arteriole, it comes down here to the efferent arteriole. Now this one shows you more detail of this part. So you could see here the Bowman's capsule, and then you have the glomerulus. Now here, as we trace from there, coming from the cortical radiate artery, then it continues onto this arteriole as we identified here. So this should be the afferent arteriole, okay? And then it goes to the glomerulus. You imagine that there will be filtration here. We will look here in the lecture, okay, that there will be filtration here. So you have filtration membrane here, okay, and the blood goes, it passes through here, and then it goes out after filtration. Now what is being filtered out here would be primarily water and nitrogenous waste products. So they will all be collected here in the Bowman's capsule, and then it goes down here. So we'll trace this one here later on. Okay, but just for you to take note, this one is the efferent arteriole. Now note here that the afferent arteriole is bigger than the efferent arteriole. Okay. Now let's continue on here. So there is filtration here. So the filtrate primarily would be water and nitrogenous waste products. There would also be some that will go with the filtrate here, those that are important to the body, such as glucose. Okay, proteins are not normally filtered out here. Okay, glucose and other substances, even vitamins, may pass through here. Okay, so this one, the first tubules here that you find would be the proximal convoluted tubule. Convoluted because they convolute. Okay. Okay. So you have the proximal convoluted tubule. Then it goes down here. This is the loop of Henle. Okay. So you have primarily two segments of the loop of Henle. So this one would be the descending. Okay. Descending limb, and then it loops here. So this is the main loop of Henle, and then this one is the ascending limb. And then it continues on to the distal convoluted tubule. And then you have the connecting duct there, and then this one would now be the collecting duct. Okay, note here that the connecting duct is different from the collecting duct. All right, so what do you think are these ones? These are all connecting ducts coming from the other nephrons. Now, what is a nephron? So this is the unit of urine formation, such that you understand that this unit includes the Bowman's capsule with the glomerulus, and then the proximal and the distal convoluted tubule and the loop of Henle. So this one would form the nephron. So you imagine that in the kidneys, it has a lot of nephrons. And if you are going to see it under the light microscopy, you would see these ones. And you call this as renal corpuscles. Renal corpuscles. Actually, this renal corpuscles consist of this, the Bowman's capsule and the glomerulus. Okay? So if you say renal corpuscle, this consists of the Bowman's capsule and the glomerulus. If you say nephron, this consists of the renal corpuscle and the kidney tubules and the loop of Henle. Okay? Now, you would see here the association of the efferent arteriole with the tubules, the kidney tubules. They are closely associated because you will find out in the lecture that this, the filtrate that goes down here, some of which would be reabsorbed in the kidney tubules. So we call this as tubular reabsorption. Some of this sodium, water would be reabsorbed in the kidney tubules, and they would join the bloodstream, okay, through the efferent arteriole here, and then you would see here, this would be part of the efferent arteriole, and then it would go back here to systemic circulation, all right, through the venous system. So coming from here, then it goes to the segmental vein, from the arcuate vein to the segmental vein, and then if you follow through here, this goes down here to the renal vein. Okay. Now note here that this one comes from the dorsal aorta. Okay. But this one goes to where? To the inferior vena cava. So from the inferior vena cava, as you know, it is returned to the bloodstream via the inferior vena cava. It goes to the right atrium, to the right ventricle, and on. All right? So you know where this one comes from, right? From the aorta, okay, and then to the abdominal aorta, and then it goes here to the kidneys for filtration. You have questions here. Did you identify this one?
Yeah, that's
If this one is part of the proximal convoluted tubule, as you can see, this one is part of the distal convoluted tubule. This is proximal, the one immediately after the Bowman's capsule. And then here you have the distal convoluted tubule. Okay. Now here, so the blood is, the urine is collected here, and it goes down here to the ureter, then to the urinary bladder, then out from the body to the urethra. Okay, so I would like you to master this one, plus you have the microscopic structures that you will see tomorrow.